Hello. Hello, this is Ian Robinson. Welcome to our Solicitors Masterclass. We're waiting for 2 or 3 people to arrive. We know they're on the way, so don't worry if it takes us just a little bit of time to get to full working order. Today, hopefully, we're going to provide you with a lot of up-to-date information about what's happening in the legal marketplace. I think you'll be quite staggered at some of the data and information we're going to provide for you. And also, we're going to provide a more personal feel about how you can improve your own performance or your business's performance by turning opportunities into income. So we're not going to push anything. We're not trying to sell anything. We're not going to be spammy. We will, at the end of the webinar, send out an email that basically will say, yeah, if you want to have a conversation with any of us, and there are 3 of us, and I'll introduce them in due course, we'll be only too pleased to have a conversation and talk things through with you on a one-to-one basis. During the I've just had a message through, Steve, that somebody can't hear me.
Okay.
How is everybody else doing?
Could everybody answer in the Q&A, just tell us whether you can hear us or not? Okay.
Okay, good. So, Melanie, are you able to adjust your speakers? Because everybody else can hear. You'll have to I have to apologise to you. I've gone down with the lurgy at the moment, so if I sound a little bit bunged up, I am. So bear with me. So going on, yeah, we're going to try and provide to you a full raft of information and data. And in fact, Viv, who will be talking about the legal marketplace, has presented to us some interesting information that's from an article from the Futures, Legal Futures magazine, which is quite staggering and will actually highlight the need for you to know more detail. So let me just introduce Viv. Viv has been in and around the legal marketplace for a number of years. He's a veteran, and I mean a veteran. And I think you'll find that his take, his information, the data that he has, the observations he'll make will be quite enlightening and will be very helpful for you to exercise the right options going forward. My other colleague who's with me today, Steve Mills, runs his own business development agency and works not only with lawyers but also across a wide remit of different sectors. And the beauty of our coming together, if you like, is that we're trying to bring into legal practice things that are happening commercially elsewhere and applying that. So you get the best of all worlds to produce good business development, improving your turnovers, improving your conversion rates of potential leads, which is one of the biggest issues that I think lawyers have. So let me just confirm to you now, the webinar is being recorded and we will send out a polished up version to you in due course. It will be available on social media as well. During the webinar, there is a Q&A, so please do jot down any questions that you have. Don't hold back. The worst scenario for running a webinar is those questions you wish you'd asked and the webinar's finished. So no question is stupid. Just move forward and get those questions asked. We will definitely have a defined period of time, probably 15 minutes or so, towards the end of the webinar. We will finish at 1:30, and I hope you enjoy the next hour or so. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Viv, and he'll take you through what's currently happening around the legal marketplace.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I hope you've taken the time and you'll get some real value from this. I think what I'd like to do is just to put a bit of background in place. I mean, the legal profession has remained largely unchanged for the last 300 years. We've seen solicitors becoming personally wealthy because their model, up until 2007, which was the only model they were allowed to use, was to operate their business under a partnership model. So you end up with individual partners who are quite literally growing their individual wealth, but without retaining any value in the business. And that's only when the SRA started, which was only in 2007, where this change of ownership rules started. And we started to see the growth of the LLP and more latterly the limited company. We're now just under 70% incorporated businesses and have moved away from the traditional partnership. Unfortunately, doing what I do, working with law firms as a non-exec, a chairman and a chief exec, I find that some people still want to retain their partnership status, even though they've incorporated into a limited company. And I'll touch on that a bit later. So we've been running constantly for the past decade or so, over 10,400, 10,500 law firms. And for the first time in the last 2 years, we've seen that number drop below 10,000. And that's quite an interesting and indicative figure, I think. I think if we have a look at the way that professional services have evolved, let's look at other sectors. Let's, for example, take opticians. Now, 20 years ago, there was an optician on most high streets all throughout the UK. That optician market has consolidated with private equity backing under the brands of Specsavers, Vision Express, etc. And all those independent opticians have actually been acquired, targeted, purchased, and put into the new brands. And that's what consolidation we're starting to see in the legal profession. Same things happen with vets, multiples of staggering amounts for multi-site veterinary practices, again, with veterinary stores, supermarkets opening up vet practices in the back of the stores. It's again private equity backed. So what we're seeing is a swing with private equity into the professions, which change the way that we do things. So if we've dropped below 10,000 firms for the first time in a number of years, probably in 20 years, we've got to start thinking about what that future holds. And what we've started to see is more and more firms deciding that they have to change what they do. And that's part of today. And I've used the expression several times now, firms are at the crossroads of decision making. Now, it could well be that they are facing a succession problem, because let's not kid ourselves, there is still a succession crisis within the profession. And again, not looking at the age profile of the attendees today, many people have decided to take that move and either set themselves up in new types of practices, and we'll come to talk about what that could be, and others have actually said, well, we can't stay as we are. The number of firms who I've spoken to who assumed that the owners, when they incorporated, that their associates and senior partners would want to take equity in the business. And in most cases, people do not want the responsibility and the authority. So what they've ended up doing is saying, we want a good job, we want a good salary, but we don't want ownership. Because owning a law firm can be quite perilous. I mean, without question, there's the challenge of finance, there's the challenge of professional indemnity. And as I'm sure many of you have seen who've been involved in professional indemnity, the rise in that market, particularly for firms doing conveyancing, has been quite dramatic. We've seen as much as 80% rise in some practices, who've had a bad claims history, and it becomes unaffordable to run a practice with professional indemnity insurance going the way it is. We have no new entrants in the professional indemnity marketplace, so therefore it's even going to be more expensive for those firms that can get it, whether they can afford it. We have a 30% of the market renew on the 1st of April, which is only a week away, and the remaining 70 renew on the 1st of October. And I think what we're hearing from the insurance sector is that people are being very selective because there's no new capacity to offer new insurance products to other people. So we have to look at that as being part of the challenge. And it could well be that on the 1st of April, if a firm can't find insurance, their only alternative will be to merge. And that could be the catalyst that puts them into a position where they're being forced to make a decision. I try and talk to firms all the time about the changes that's going on around them and what the things they need to do. And what we've seen, of course, is the growth in these consultant solicitor models throughout the country. And again, looking at some of the numbers that Ian referred to earlier, the biggest of these so far is Keystone Law, which of course is a floated IPO on the stock market. But their turnover, according to Legal Futures yesterday, is 35 million that comes from these consultant solicitors. But they have 386 of them working for them. On the other end of the spectrum, running through from Gunnar Cook, Taylor Rose, etc., to Setford's, is where Setford's turnover is 18 million, but they also have 400 consultants working for them. So it's not going to be difficult for you to work out the maths that if you're working as a consultant solicitor, how do you generate actual income? Because certainly these types of businesses do not generate the work for you. Generally speaking, a professional practice would be marketing itself, would be generating leads, which will be passed on to the staff. When you become a consultant solicitor, you're generally expected on an eat what you kill basis to go out there and find the work and convert that work yourself. And what we'll be looking at later is how you benefit that, because I'm sure some of you, if you haven't joined the idea of the consultant solicitor model, you might be considering it. So there's a growth there. And I think the article concluded that what we will see is the survival of the fittest. So within the next 5 years, we may well see 40% of the legal sector being operated under this type of consultant solicitor model. So you work under a limited company, under your own guise, but under the banner and professional indemnity of a larger organization. But they will not be going out finding you the work. You have to find a way of generating that yourself. So there will be consolidation in that sector as well. And I think we have about 40 firms now offering this consultant solicitor package where you can become a consultant solicitor, working under some administrative support and certainly some PI cover. But it doesn't take a lot to work out that if you're working for someone like Setford's, there's an awful lot of consultants who are not doing particularly well in terms of income. And if we take the old adage of the 80-20 rule, a lot of people will be making a lot of money, but others will be making very little. So we just have to find a way of dealing with that model. We also have, as I mentioned earlier, less than 10,000 law firms. And what that means is that we are going to see consolidation. Consolidation has been waiting for the last 2 years through the pandemic to see what the market will do. And I think by and large, people have done relatively well, most law firms, because they've cut their costs accordingly. They dealt with a furlough scheme and have done relatively well out of the pandemic and the government support. But what we're seeing now is this squeeze on professional indemnity insurance and the banks looking very unfavorably at some law firms and some law firm finances where they still have C-bills loans and bounce back loans to pay back, and there's no more government support out there. And of course, the other swing that we're seeing, and I know we'll hear from the Chancellor today, at the same time as we're speaking now, about the rise in inflation and what impact that can have on all businesses, let alone solicitors' practices. It's the highest it's been for 30 years. And I have no doubt that the cost of fuel and what's happening in Ukraine will have an impact on law firm management. So where do you attract liquid cash to help you give you the working capital to grow and develop the business? There's going to be some challenges ahead. And I still maintain that although the PI renewals might be the catalyst, the real challenge we have in the legal profession is still succession. I still think and know that we still have male-dominated partnership models, even though they may be LLPs, that are operating in basically an archaic way. And we'll go on to talk about how those can change. But in principle, we haven't seen the catastrophes and failures that I think many people, including myself, have been predicting. I think it's been timing, and I think the government support and the redundancies, etc., and the office closures have made a big impact on law firms who have seen maybe their turnover drop, but their profits actually going up with more cash in the bank because they've cut their costs. So if we take that going forward, if we still maintain there was a succession problem in March 2020, then there's still a succession problem today because those firms haven't gone anywhere. And when I'm talking to firms now, we've got partners who are trying to find an exit. They can't get younger people to invest into their business models, whether it be limited companies, LLPs, or even partnerships, because people don't want that responsibility. So we end up with a plethora of probably as many as 3,000 law firms who will be looking to find a home in the next few years. Now that's taking it down to about 6,000 on average for the UK, which is not unrealistic. We have sole practitioners amongst those. We have 2, 3, 4, 5 partner practices. I had a call the other day from a very sizable legal aid practice saying we've just had enough with all the court closures. We're enough equity here to make it work. Can you help us find a buyer? And I think that consolidation will gather momentum over the next 2, 3, maybe up to 5 years. Consolidation is on the agenda. So if you are looking at growth, potential growth is to acquire a law firm. But needless to say, if you are going to acquire a law firm, make sure you get your due diligence right to start with. I have many, many firms out there who are looking to grow by acquisition. And I think there's an opportunity there to acquire, merge with other firms because there are loads of consolidators in the space looking to acquire. So I have little doubt that private equity will have a big impact, but that private equity is not for everyone. And of course, we've had this rush to flotation. We've seen, I think it's 14 firms now who have either indicated about floating or have gone for flotation. But then we saw very carefully that one of the highest profile of these is Knights, of course. Knights issued a profit warning yesterday. Their shares fell 45% in one day. So IPO is not always the solution that people want. But I certainly think the consolidation backed by private equity, which is exactly what happened in the opticians and vets markets, will come to legal. Now, that will be sector specific. So, for example, we've already seen it in the conveyancing sector. We're starting to see technology driving that product and that service forward. We will see a reduction in timescales and an increase in efficiency. And that can be offshored in some cases, or it can be using the technology that comes along with things like blockchain, where you can take a line of challenge right from the estate agent right through to the conveyancer and the mortgage company, all can be viewed by everybody else. Those products are in the market now. And I think what we've seen is a gradual reduction in the number of firms who can afford to do conveyancing, let alone the cost of PI that supports it, in conjunction with using technology to drive their services forward in a different way. And we've got do-it-yourself conveyancing that's come on the market recently, all of which will have an impact on those firms who have relied on conveyancing as a stable part of their business models. And if we look at other sector-specific areas, we have to look at what's the market for wills and probate. Unfortunately, many lawyers over the years have built up quite a significant will bank, but have they actually marketed to that will bank? In other words, they might be sitting on several thousand wills, but have they written to those people offering to upgrade the wills? Have they offered to look at lasting powers of attorney, trusts, other things that could be done to enhance both the cash flow for the law firm and to give the client something they need? So I think for many cases, we've seen the acquisition of will bank in some cases as being the only solution for some law firms to find an exit plan. And that would be on an annuity type basis. So you might find that you can take a will bank, cleanse the data within that will bank, use the will bank, therefore, to market to it and generate substantial sums of money and funds. which you could then share with the selling law firm without the risk of acquiring their practice. There are ways and means of dealing with that, which I'm doing with several firms currently. So I think it's quite important to understand what the opportunities can be. I think the other thing we've seen recently is a huge war on talent. I'm astonished to see some of the salaries being offered for individuals to join law firms, particularly in London and some of the cities, whereas we're starting to see large salaries, £30,000-40,000 above where they currently are. And I would argue those salaries aren't sustainable going forward. So I suspect that the rush for talent at the moment, because people can't find that quality of staff to do the work, yet when they find that they've taken someone on with a very large salary, maybe the work's not going to be sustainable if we take an inflation issue as part of the future. So I think we need to be very, very careful in our thought processes. I'm of the view that when I talk about at the crossroads, it's for firms to decide whether, is it time for them to consider being acquired by someone else? And that can be done in a very under the radar type way. It doesn't have to be done as a distressed purchase. So I have several of these going on at the moment where the law firm, through pure age and succession, is looking to, each of the partners are looking to exit over the next 2 to 3 years. The acquirer will come in, invest money, allow them to take their capital out over that period, done in a very gentlemanly, if that's such a word now, way, so it's done properly and everyone can feel comfortable in what they do. So there are solutions for those type of firms. Unfortunately for others, there may well be the only option is to sell the will bank, because no one wants to become a successor practice for a 1 or 2 partner firm who hasn't really moved with the times and hasn't dealt with what's happening. Technology is having a huge impact on the way we deliver legal services, not just social media. I'm talking about the process. The vast majority of the work we do in legal firms is process driven. And whether we accept that or not, technology will make such a difference. And when we look at artificial intelligence and how it's predicting the outcome of litigation matters and so forth, it will have a massive impact on the way we see legal services operate. And it could well be that following the American models, we saw LegalZoom, Rocket Lawyer coming into the UK market over 10 years ago and not really making a great success out of it. But they could well be back. So the subscription-based legal services, only using a solicitor for some real high value, that will be not dependent on hourly rates, by the way, it will be on mainly fixed fees. And that's the other area we need to think about. So far, many of the traditional firms still work on the premise of, yes, they give estimates, but they're still working on a time-based model. And I think what the buying public are looking for and corporates are fixed price legal services. So we have to think about that and how that works as well. So I think in summary, we're seeing probably the perfect storm where we're starting to see challenges for talent, because many of these individual talented solicitors have gone off to the consultant solicitor model. We're starting to see consolidation with the legal practices, some of which will be smoother than others. I think we will see distress. I talk regularly to insolvency practitioners who specialize in law firm insolvency, and they've been exceptionally quiet the last 2 years, but they are anticipating a bit of a rush. And it will be driven by something, for example, professional indemnity premiums that they can't afford. I think we had 35 in October that couldn't run their PI premiums and had to close. And we had a similar number in March last year. I'm expecting something similar this year, although I think that will increase as we see a squeeze on bank lending and more firms finding it more difficult to operate with working capital. So I think when we look at that and we look at what's happening with flotations and we look at the growth of private equity, there's so many options for individuals and law firms to consider. What you need is some clear guidance dependent on your own circumstances about what direction you want to take, whether it's to go off and become a consultant solicitor individually, whether it's to merge your practice with someone else, or how you do that, how you find the right merger partner. And don't join a list where there are a number of firms out there that list firms for sale. It may not say exactly who you are, but believe me, people know there are two equity partner practice in High Wycombe is this particular firm, and everyone knows they're up for sale. And you don't want to look at distress. You want to deal with it before it happens. But there will be distress. There will be failure, unfortunately. But more importantly, there will be consolidation. So my message to all of you today is, whilst you're at the crossroads today, make a decision about which direction you want to go in. Is it going around the consultant solicitor model? Is it building a consultant solicitor practice yourself? Is it acquiring and grow by acquiring other law firms? Or is it to sell your practice? Whichever one it is, there's guidance out there that can be done very subtly, very carefully, that can give you the opportunities and help to guide you through the process of managing change within the legal profession. I'd now like to pass over to Steve, who will just talk about the various things that we can do to take some of those challenges I've highlighted and how we can deal with them.
Thank you, Viv. That was really interesting and a real eye-opener, I'm sure, for everybody listening today. So firstly, just on behalf of myself, thank you for being here. What I want to try to do is to make sure my section, as with Viv's section, gives you loads of value. My background slightly different to Ian and Viv, in so much that I'm not like 100%, you know, in the law firm industry. I've been doing this being helping businesses to grow for over a quarter of a century, and I've certainly specialized in the law industry. And I also specialize in professional services generally, working with accountants and so on and so forth. Now, when I first started out in business, obviously, you know, the world of marketing, boy, has it changed. You know, Viv mentioned about, you know, the changes in in your industry, but, you know, the world of marketing, it's like a whole new ball game. You know, back when I started, we were sending out letters through the post and following them up by email or on the phone and so on and so forth. And traditionally back then, you know, solicitors sort of relied very heavily on networking and referrals and so on and so forth, advertising in various magazines and newspapers and so on. In the world that we're in now, some of them are still doing that type of marketing, and I think it's a great idea, and I do think that type of marketing, when I say that type, I mean the old traditional stuff. I do believe there's an opportunity for that. I remember just the other day, I got a postcard through the post, literally a piece of paper from Google, you know, and I thought to myself, you know, if Google, the world's leading, or one of the world's leading technology companies, are sending postcards with a stamp on, then, you know, maybe that, you know, what I've been saying about the traditional ways is probably true. However, there's also a great opportunity to embrace this digital world that we all live in. And that's in a way a little bit of what I wanted to talk about today. But I wanted to talk, if I may, about something that I call geometric marketing. You might be thinking, what on earth does that mean? Many years ago, when I first started out, I thought to myself, right, who's the world's leading marketing person? Because I really want to get to know this subject of marketing to a level that is much higher than most people. And so I searched this. I did a Google search for who's the world's leading marketing person. And it came up with a guy called Jay Abraham, an American guy. And he charged me $3,800 to go to America for a week to spend time with him. And he spoke about this principle of geometric marketing, which I'd like to explain a little bit about today. So if you took what you're doing right now, you said, well, we win business from referral, we'll do some networking, we got a website, we're doing some social media, and we're doing stuff on that. And I asked you to rate that on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being it's awful, 5 being it's average, 10 being it's absolutely fantastic, outstanding, we're getting an amazing return on our investment. And when I say rate it, I'm not talking about how pretty your website is. I'm talking about how much business does it create, because ultimately that's certainly what I'm about, and I hope it's what you're about. So if you think about that, now Jay's philosophy is that in a sentence, it's that the amount of time, money, and effort you put into marketing, there's no reflection on the rewards that you can get from that marketing. So let me give you an example. If we spoke about your website, which is the hub of your marketing, it's where everything comes into, it's centralized, it's where, probably anybody who's thinking of hiring you goes and has a look at, to check out their website before we even make a phone call or send an email out. We're going to check out your website. If we looked at that and said, right, how could we get more from our website? How can we get more inquiries from it? There are really two things that come to mind. For me, one is traffic. How many people are going to your website? And the second one is conversion. How many people inquire as a result of it? So there's no point you doing something like, Google AdWords and getting thousands of people and spending hundreds of pounds getting people to a website that doesn't convert. So we've got to make sure your website converts. So let's just take a step back and look at this traffic thing. So if you're getting an amount of people to your website right now, that's great. Well done, whatever that is. But my question to you is, A, what are you doing? And B, how could you improve that? Could you do more work? So on social media, let's take something like, LinkedIn. People say to me, well, I'm on LinkedIn, but I don't really do very much from it. And I'll say, right, okay, well, what are you doing? Let's just clarify that to start with. They'll say, well, I go on there once a week and I post on it. And I get these people connecting to me. And, I've got like 500 people I'm connected to. But other than that, Steve, I don't really do very much. So here lies the problem. We've got this fantastic website called LinkedIn. There are 32 million people on it just in the UK, 800 million worldwide, and we're connected to 500 of them. You can see the problem. We need to grow the number of people we're able to communicate with. And then step 2, we need to be communicating with them. Step 3, we need to start driving them to our website. So we need to be saying things like, giving them information and ideas and places to go and look for information so that they can do that. So that's just one idea that I've got for expanding the amount of traffic that goes to your website. But essentially, you can do that in a couple of ways. You can do it through work, through time, taking time to do your social media and so on and so forth, or you could invest money. Now, I've just set up something this morning on my website, which I'm doing with Facebook. It's called retargeting, or sometimes called remarketing. And basically, it's the policy of saying to Facebook, if somebody comes to my website, then I want to advertise to them on Facebook. Now, you're probably thinking, well, how on earth does it do that? The truth is, you don't need to know. All you need to know is you need to get somebody to do it for you, putting a little bit of code on your website so that Facebook knows who's interested in you, and then they start showing adverts to those people. Now, I've been doing this on Google for many, many years, probably about 3 or 4 years now that this has been around on Google. And with Google, it's using the Google Partner Network, of which there are 2.5 million websites. So I can say to Google, I'm based down in Portsmouth, and I could say to Google, right, if anybody comes to my website who are either in Portsmouth or in the UK, or anybody worldwide comes to it, I want to start advertising on the Google network. And the great thing about this is it costs, I was going to say pennies. That's not quite true. I think my monthly bill is about £30 a month to advertise to literally everybody and anybody who comes to my website. Now, why am I doing that? Well, if they've come to my website, potentially they're interested. Now, I don't know whether you know this, but the average conversion rate of a website is 1%. So if you get 100 people coming to your website, you should, on average, worldwide, get one inquiry. Okay, so that means that 99% of the people who are visiting my website, they're just disappearing. They're going away, never to be seen again. So rather than that, I'm now advertising to them on the Google network and on Facebook. So that's one example, just one example of many I could give you of a way in which, if you weren't aware of that as an opportunity, you now are, and you could potentially, utilize that going forward. That's just another way of marketing that perhaps you're not yet using. Regarding your conversion rate of your website, we're now using Facebook and Google and social media and all these things to get loads of people visiting your site. The big problem is it's not converting. Why is it not converting? Well, if you looked at your website after this webinar and answered the question, what is my MWA, my most wanted action? What is the action that you want people to take as a result of visiting that page? Now, obviously, I don't know your website, but I have looked at many law firms' websites, and I can tell you this. They're covered in MWAs. They got click here, join our newsletter, go and have a look at this, go and have a look at that. And it's very much a mixed message. So, what is the number one? What do you want people to do when they visit your website? Could you do things like improve the headline? If you've got a page called Our Services or About Us, there's nothing you could do to make that more interesting, more powerful, more getting, incentivizing people to click on that link than About Us. No, with all respect, nobody cares about you. All I care about is what you can do for me. And that, I think, is a real turnaround in thought there. And it's a mistake, as you probably be aware. A lot of businesses make, not just law firms, but businesses in general. They have a page called Our Services, another one called About Us, and so on and so forth, which, in my opinion, not the best. So what else could you do on that page? Well, you could improve the headline, you could improve the subheads, you could improve the words, you could add a picture, you could add video. Video is so powerful. People buy, as it says on the sign behind me, people buy from people they know, like, and trust. And in your profession, that is absolutely paramount. If you can get people to know you, like you, and trust you, what am I going to do? Go to Google, or am I going to go to the law firm or the solicitor that I know, like, and trust? I remember many years ago when I moved house, I just met my wife. There was a law firm that we used in Cardiff, actually. She moved from Cardiff to where I lived. And it was a great guy called Richard. And 2 years later, I said to her, we were thinking of buying another property. And I said to her, that guy, that solicitor, Richard, what was his name? She said, I can't remember. What was the firm? Oh, I don't know. So we Googled it and we couldn't really find it. And I said, well, we must have something. We must have something from him. Anyway, long story short, couldn't find anything. Now, he knew that at the time we just got married. What did he do in terms? It's a little bit like what Viv was saying here. He'd done the conveyancing work and missed out on a shed load of other work that he could have got from us. We just got together. What about wills? What about this? What about that? I would have probably used Richard for the rest of my life. And I only used him once because he never got in touch. He never did any, and still to this day, and I'm talking 15 years later, no contact with him whatsoever. And, he's probably lost out on, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 grand, who knows, but certainly a load of money. So I bought 2 or 3 properties now. So, you know, that I think is a really important thing. So if you looked at, you know, I suppose each element of your marketing, and one of the big ones, you know, that you could be thinking about is referral, because I'm a massive believer, not only in the legal industry, but in any industry, in the power of referral. Even though, you know, in this world of technology and great, you know, Google stuff and you know, social media and so on and so forth, if you pin me down and said to me, what is the best way of marketing my law firm or my business, I would definitely say, without any shadow of a doubt, it's referral, word of mouth. It's incredibly powerful. However, most law firms that I meet don't have a system for winning business from referral. Well, they do. Their system is they do a good job and they hope that people will recommend them. Or perhaps they do a good job and they say to them at the end of you know, that particular piece of work, I was wondering whether you knew anybody else who'd be interested in what we do. And that again is a system, but my question to you is it the best system? I'd like to just, if I may, just discuss something that I think works really, really well and has worked fantastically well for the law firms that I've worked with. It's a system, it's a process. And the idea behind it is that at some point following a particular piece of work that you've done for the client, you're going to call them up and you're going to say something like, hi, Steve Mills here from ABC Solicitors. We recently did your fill in the blank, whatever it is. And I'm just calling to make sure it's part of our customer service to make sure that you are happy with everything. And they say, yeah, great, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. If you get a response like that, that gives you the opportunity to then say something like, I was wondering, we win a lot of our business from personal recommendation from satisfied clients like yours. I was wondering whether out of all the people that you know, that perhaps you could think of 2 or 3 people that we might be able to help in the same way that we've helped you. Now, that may or may not be appropriate to do in all cases. I don't think it is, but that might be one way of winning an amount of business. Another way could be, you know, just literally to send them perhaps a little card that they can pass on to people. But my point being that you have several referral systems in your practice in order to increase the amount of business that you win from referrals. I hope that makes sense. And then, you know, with each and every element of your marketing, you look at that and you say, how can we do better? How can we get more from this, whatever this may be? You know, whether if you're doing social media, you know, how can we get more from that? By the way, we as a business, and we're a very small business, we do really well on LinkedIn. And I think for you and your law firm, you know, LinkedIn is just such a natural, you know, it's where all your target market are, you know, 32 million in the UK, pretty much they are the senior people, assuming that is your market. But they're definitely the senior people, the management, business owners, doctors, lawyers, you know, accountants, and so on. So the question is, what's the number one way of winning business on LinkedIn? And I can tell you now, without any shadow of a doubt, the number one way is to speak to people. Speak to people. It's not to post stuff. That you know, we do that every day, and we don't win that much business from that. Where we win business is by picking up the phone and talking to people. Now, I'm not suggesting you start cold calling people. I don't mean that. I mean, you know, having conversations. If you think of it, really, LinkedIn is like networking. It's like going to a Chamber of Commerce event this evening, turning up there, and you've got 50 people in the room, and you're going to have conversations with them. And on LinkedIn, instead of having 50, you've got 30 million in the UK. But let's say realistically, you've got your number of contacts that you're connected to. So that could be 500, it could be 1,000. So you might want to think about that. But just take the time out. If you're serious about growing, then take the time out and go and look at each element of what you're doing in terms of your marketing, and work out what you could do to improve the performance of that. As Ian said, if you want a conversation with me about that, I'm very happy to do a sort of free half-an-hour review. You can come to me and tell me what you're doing. I'll try and give you some tips and ways in which I can help you. I know the other two guys, Viv and Ian, are very happy to help you in a different way, because we got different skills. So that's it. That's my talk. I hope that was of value. I hope you'll take it on board. Again, with these things, it's all about taking action. So take some action and see if you can improve your results. Thanks very much for listening.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Viv. We've got a couple of questions, or actually 3 or 4. So, Viv, I've got a question for you. It's quite a techie question. I don't know whether you'll be able to answer it. But, Viv, how do we deal with GDPR issues repurchasing of will banks?
Yeah, there's a whole series of SRA approved letters that you have to send to the existing holder of the will to explain why the will bank has been acquired and who it's going to be passed on to. But we have addressed those issues, so it's all done with approved communication techniques, informing the people who actually once the data is cleansed, you can approach them quite openly and get around it that way. So it's already been dealt with. I have some wording and documentation. If you'd like more information, just ask.
And I suppose this is a bit of a follow-on from that, from Robin. Although it's specifically for Steve, this is how does remarketing, i.e. specific marketing, sit with the SRA code of conduct? And he specifically mentions paragraph 8.9 and solicited approaches.
I'll give my take on it.
Okay.
I don't really know. All I can tell you is that I know with things like GDPR and things like that, giving out people's names and things. I don't get to know who they are. Google's not saying, right, all these people have been to your website. Here's a list of them. All they're doing is saying these people have been to your website, so we'll start advertising, showing them adverts. But I don't know, Viv, can you help me on this? Because I don't know.
No. Quite simply done. I think it depends whether we're talking about private clients or corporates. Again, marketing is an open. I think you've got a challenge in direct marketing if you're approaching individuals, but in terms of corporate, there's no application there. So I think in reality, if you're doing a more generic marketing, I'm not quite sure how it would fit in under what you've just described.
But worth looking into, definitely.
Yeah.
See if you can get some clarification on that.
Super, thank you. Melanie's asked, and someone made a statement as well, the personal injury market has been eaten by very badly managed firms such as Slater Gordon. The way in which we can generate revenue has been killed by SRA regulation. How can we battle to do this?
Well, I think there's a very simple answer, and unfortunately, it's not the one you want to hear. I think it's a battle we've already lost. I think the regulator decided that RTA fast track work would be killed off. And if we look at the numbers of firms who are now find it unviable to run personal injury books, and that's where you're seeing the bigger firms doing the clinic, industrial disease, etc. work, We're seeing acquisitions, we're seeing mergers. I'm afraid the personal injury market that we knew has gone, and I don't think we can ever recover from that. We've even got technology now using AI in driving fast-track RTA cases. I'm afraid it's a sector we've lost, and it's been, as you quite rightly point out, being killed off by the regulator who decided that this isn't an area that we want to specialize in. There wasn't that many firms doing fast-track work and making it pay. There's even less now. So I'm afraid it's a battle that's already gone, sadly.
Okay, thanks, Viv. Here's a sort of statement stroke question. We talked about solicitor firms getting lots and lots of referrals and leaving, if you like, money on the table. I think, Steve, you didn't sort of touch on this a little bit. Could you be a little bit more specific in certain actions, particularly for the smaller firm, because they too will be generating.
Sorry, just clarify that for me, would you? Sorry. What are you asking?
Well, the question is, you mentioned around referrals.
Yes.
And firms specifically do target market, but they don't actually follow it through. We've come across a number of examples in just the recent past where we're aware that I think I seem to remember 6,000 leads were generated, but only 1% of those were converted.
Yeah. That happens, all the time. I was talking this morning to a client who's just spent £4,000 attending an exhibition, and when I say just, it was 2 weeks ago. This morning I spoke to him and said, all those leads that you had 2 weeks ago, 50 of them, you got 50 leads. Have you followed them up yet? And he went, well, I've been busy, and it's just, they're now 2 weeks old, and the old saying is another day older is another day colder. And, when an inquiry comes in, I've always believed that speed stuns. It's like, oh, that firm's got back to me really quickly. They must be really good then. I think that's a really important one. And I think as far as referrals concerned, if you've got, I'll just use 100 clients so we can talk percentages here. If you've got 100 clients and you made a phone call to them, not necessarily, the people on the call, but somebody, you got somebody, whether it was a PA or you've got a marketing person that's, whose job it is to make those calls, but you called and, I'm calling on as part of our customer service just to make sure that you're happy. Is there anything we can do for you right now? And then you go into that little script. And let's say you called 100. If you think about it right now, maybe you've got 1 or 2 clients who wouldn't give you a referral because, they weren't quite happy with the outcome or the work or whatever. You've probably then got let's say 20% of them who give you referrals on a fairly regular basis. But that leaves, 79% that would give you a referral. They would recommend you, but they're not waking up every morning thinking, about recommending you. Why not? Because they're busy people. They've got stuff to do. They would recommend you, but they just don't. And they're the people that I believe are the opportunity. You're never going to get all 79, but if you could go from getting 20 out of 100 to 30 out of 100, that's just grown your, the amount of business that you accrue from referral by 50%. And another great way of looking at numbers, because as the old saying is, numbers are the currency of business, is to look at the number of inquiries that come in and work out your conversion rates. Because if you could, if you're currently getting 4 out of 10 turn into an instruction, and you could, because you improved your processes and the way you do it and the speed that you follow up, if you could get that up to 6 out of 10 instead of 4 out of 10, that's actually over time a 50% growth in your business, not a 20% improvement, 50% growth in your practice. How powerful is that? Just by being better at following up on leads and things.
Oh, thanks, Steve. That's great. Another question quickly for Viv. This is from Roy. My question to Viv, do you see any uptick or downtick in mergers due to the Ukraine crisis? What do you think will be the effect of this crisis generally for private firms?
I think unless you're performing litigation work on behalf of Russian oligarchs, and as we've seen, quite a few of the top 100 law firms have pulled out of the Russian market, I think the crisis will be much more personal rather than from a business point of view. I think I am actually chief exec of a London litigation practice. We made the commercial decision that we would advise Russian clients, but not actually take any new instructions. So we advise them on things they're doing with their business based in the UK. So unfortunately, I think that market is a tough one. There'll be a massive human impact, but I think in terms of legal work, we still have to see what impact that has in the UK.
And one further question. When you were talking about the legal marketplace, we saw at the beginning of this year, and maybe the end of last year, some movement with foreign investors coming in. Do they see the legal marketplace, the UK legal marketplace, as an attractive place to invest?
Absolutely. We have a US American law firm have actually acquired a top 100 clinical negligence firm called Fletcher's. We're seeing lots of interest from the US in growing and building on the back of what is a disjointed UK legal sector. So I think they see consolidation as part of it. We've also got Swedish money over here, £250 million to acquire law firms, offering quite sizable chunks of EBITDA. That's earnings before tax and depreciation, etc. The standard that Knights and others have been paying is anywhere between 3 to 5 EBITDA. So they've certainly been offering 5 times EBITDA as a margin on turnovers of 5 to 10 million. That's going to increase. I suspect that multiple sites, more attractive offers, and more competition coming in from private equity. For private equity, I've never known the interest from private equity as high as it is now. And they're all over the legal space. Unfortunately, it doesn't suit the smaller law firm. It tends to be for the mid-size and slightly larger one, and very sector specific, like conveyancing. But there's lots and lots of interest from private equity to invest in the legal sector. They see huge growth in this fragmented market in the UK.
Oh, thank you for that, Viv. Well, that's the end of our questions for today. It's timed up quite nicely. It's 13:28, and as we promised, we'd finish at 13:30. As I say, we will be sending out a sort of feedback email, and I will follow up as Steve did and say, look, if you need to get in touch with us or you want a discussion and think, we can do that. My specialism is the consultancy, solicitor, and HR marketplace. Viv, of course, can give you a much broader view over the legal market, and Steve certainly in the marketing. So any of those, and you want to have a confidential conversation, by all means get in touch. We hope you've enjoyed today's webinar. Hopefully we'll be running another one in another month or two with more topical information. Hopefully speak to you very shortly. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.